Africa is a continent of 54 countries and over 1.2 billion people. Yet it is one of the poorest continents in the world. This is largely due to the legacy of colonialism, which left the continent with weak infrastructure and a lack of economic development. During the colonial period, African countries were exploited for their resources, and their economies were largely based on extractive industries such as mining and timber, rather than on manufacturing or services. Furthermore, the colonial powers often imposed unequal trade terms and tariffs, which disadvantaged African countries. In this video, we will explore some of the key factors that contribute to the ongoing poverty that affects many African countries. Number 1. The legacy of colonialism. One of the main reasons why Africa is still poor is because of its history of colonialism. During the 19th and 20th centuries, many African countries were colonized by European powers such as Britain, France, and Portugal. Colonization disrupted traditional African societies, economies, and political systems, and often resulted in the exploitation of Africa's natural resources and labor. For example, European colonizers often imposed forced labor systems in which African people were forced to work on plantations, mines, and other economic enterprises. This exploitation of labor contributed to the development of some African economies, but it also had negative consequences for African people. Forced labor was often accompanied by violence and abuse, and it disrupted traditional African societies and ways of life. In addition to exploiting labor, European colonizers also extracted Africa's natural resources, such as minerals, oil, and timber, and often exported these resources back to Europe. This extraction of resources often benefited European economies, but it also had negative consequences for Africa. For example, the extraction of natural resources often resulted in environmental degradation and contributed to ongoing resource scarcity in many African countries. After independence, many African countries struggled to overcome the legacy of colonialism and to build strong and sustainable economies. The legacy of colonialism continues to shape the economic and political landscape of Africa, and it is one of the key reasons why the continent remains poor. Number 2. Geography. Geography is another factor that contributes to Africa's poverty. Many African countries are landlocked, which means that they are surrounded by other countries and do not have a coastline. This can make it difficult for these countries to trade with other countries and to access global markets. For example, landlocked countries often have to rely on neighboring countries to access ports and other transportation infrastructure. This can increase the cost of importing and exporting goods and make it more difficult for these countries to participate in global trade. Additionally, landlocked countries may have limited access to transportation infrastructure, such as roads and railways, which can make it difficult to move goods and people around the country. Furthermore, Africa is a large and diverse continent, and many countries are isolated from each other due to their geography. This can make it difficult for countries to trade with each other and to share resources and ideas. Additionally, Africa is prone to natural disasters such as droughts, floods, and earthquakes, which can disrupt agriculture and other economic activities. These disasters can cause widespread damage and loss of life, and they can also have long-term economic impacts by undermining development efforts and hindering efforts to improve living standards. Overall, Africa's geography has both advantages and challenges. While the continent is rich in natural resources and has a growing population, it's landlocked and disaster-prone countries face significant barriers to economic development and prosperity. Number 3. Political instability and corruption. Political instability and corruption are major contributors to Africa's poverty. Many African countries have experienced conflict and civil war, which have disrupted economic development and hindered efforts to improve living standards. Conflict can damage infrastructure, destroy businesses, and displace people, which can have long-term economic consequences. Additionally, Conflict often leads to the proliferation of weapons and the breakdown of law and order, which can create an insecure environment that discourages investment and economic activity. Furthermore, corruption is rampant in many African countries, and this can undermine the effectiveness of government programs and discourage foreign investment. Corruption can take many forms, such as embezzlement, bribery, and nepotism, and it can erode trust in government and undermine the rule of law. Additionally, corruption can divert resources away from vital services such as education and healthcare, and can contribute to inequality and social unrest. Improving political stability and reducing corruption are essential for creating an enabling environment for economic development and for improving living standards in Africa. This can involve efforts to strengthen democratic institutions, improve the rule of law, and promote transparency and accountability in government. It can also involve initiatives to build the capacity of civil society organizations and the media to hold governments accountable and to promote good governance. Number 4, lack of infrastructure. Lack of infrastructure is another significant factor that contributes to Africa's poverty. Many African countries have inadequate roads, ports, and other transportation systems, which makes it difficult to move goods and people around the continent. This lack of infrastructure can also make it difficult for businesses to operate and for people to access education, healthcare, and other essential services. For example, many African countries have poorly maintained or non-existent road networks, which can make it difficult to transport goods to market and to access remote areas. Additionally, many African countries have limited access to ports, which can make it difficult to import and export goods and to trade with other countries. Furthermore, many African countries have inadequate power and water infrastructure, which can limit economic development and hinder efforts to improve living standards. For example, lack of access to electricity can make it difficult for businesses to operate and for people to access modern forms of communication and technology. Similarly, lack of access to clean water can contribute to the spread of disease and undermine efforts to improve healthcare. Improving infrastructure is essential for reducing poverty and promoting economic development in Africa. This can involve investments in roads, ports, and other transportation infrastructure, as well as in power and water systems. Additionally, it can involve efforts to build the capacity of local communities and businesses to maintain and repair infrastructure and to develop new infrastructure projects. Lack of access to healthcare can also contribute to poverty in Africa in several ways. One way is by limiting individuals' ability to work and earn income. For example, if a person becomes ill and cannot access medical treatment, they may be unable to work, which can lead to lost wages and difficulty making ends meet. Additionally, untreated health conditions can become more severe over time, which can result in increased medical costs and longer periods of time away from work. Lack of healthcare can also lead to a cycle of poverty in which the health of an individual or community deteriorates over time, resulting in decreased productivity and earning potential. This, in turn, can lead to an inability to afford basic necessities such as food and shelter, which can further deteriorate health. It also has a strong impact on maternal and child health. High rates of maternal and infant mortality can limit population growth, which can have economic and social consequences. Also, children growing up without proper health care are at a disadvantage in terms of education and future employment opportunities, perpetuating the poverty cycle. Number 5, lack of economic diversification. Lack of economic diversification is another factor that contributes to Africa's poverty. Many African countries are heavily reliant on a single export commodity, such as oil, minerals, or agricultural products, and this makes their economies vulnerable to price fluctuations and global economic shocks. For example, if the price of a country's main export commodity declines, this can have a significant impact on the country's overall economic performance. Similarly, if demand for the commodity declines, This can also have negative consequences for the country's economy. This dependence on a single commodity can make it difficult for these countries to diversify their economies and to build resilience to economic shocks. Furthermore, economic diversification can help to create a more diverse range of employment opportunities and to reduce poverty. When a country's economy is based on a single commodity, it may be vulnerable to fluctuations in demand for that commodity, which can lead to job losses and economic hardship. By contrast, an economy that is based on a range of industries and sectors is likely to be more resilient and to provide a more diverse range of employment opportunities. Improving economic diversification is essential for reducing poverty and promoting long-term economic growth in Africa. This can involve efforts to encourage entrepreneurship and small businesses and to attract foreign investment to a range of sectors. It can also involve initiatives to build the capacity of local businesses and to promote trade within Africa and with other regions. Social safety nets such as cash transfer programs can also help to reduce poverty by providing a safety net for those who are most vulnerable. These programs can be targeted to specific groups, such as children or the elderly, and can help to reduce poverty and inequality by providing a source of income for those who are most in need. Of course, this puts many poor nations in a trapped cycle where they need social security for their poor and vulnerable populations but are too poor to implement it. In conclusion, Africa's poverty is a complex and multifaceted issue that is influenced by a range of factors, including its history, geography, political instability, corruption, lack of infrastructure, economic diversification, and levels of education and healthcare. Tackling Africa's poverty will require a comprehensive and sustained effort to address these underlying issues and build a more prosperous and equitable future for all Africans. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching Informal Economics, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.